On my 46th birthday, they handed me a cake that said, *congrats on 300 pounds. My sister toasted to the family disappointment while everyone laughed. That night, I drained the savings account they all depended on. I, 46M, never imagined that my own family would turn my birthday into the worst day of my life. But here we are. The day started like any other birthday. My wife barely opened her eyes that morning and mumbled something about needing to get up early to prepare for the party. I had been looking forward to this day for weeks. Turning 46 felt like a milestone, especially after the rough year we'd had financially. I'd been carrying the weight of everyone, supporting my wife and kids, helping my sister through her messy divorce, and even keeping my parents afloat after my dad's retirement funds took a serious hit. I went downstairs to find my wife bustling around the kitchen, unusually cheerful. She told me she had a surprise I'd never forget. She was right about that, though not in the way she meant. By early afternoon, family started to arrive. My sister was first, looking healthier than she had in months thanks to the rent I'd been covering. Then my parents came, Dad moving a bit slower these days but still smiling with pride about his successful son. My brother-in-law followed with the kids, and soon the house filled with relatives and a few close family friends. Everyone seemed in unusually high spirits, sharing glances and half-smiles I didn't yet understand. The afternoon felt almost perfect at first. I fired up the grill like I always did for family gatherings, making steaks exactly how each person liked them. My sister called me the family chef and everyone laughed. I thought it was a compliment. Dad stood beside me, helping flip the steaks, telling stories about his own birthdays, and for a moment, I felt that familiar warmth, like I was surrounded by people I loved and had sacrificed for. Then it was time for the cake. My wife disappeared into the kitchen and returned carrying a beautiful chocolate cake. Everyone gathered around the dining table, phones out to capture the moment. I felt proud and grateful, thinking this was the family I had worked so hard to support. My wife set the cake in front of me with a dramatic flourish. I looked down, and my stomach dropped. In bright blue frosting, the cake read, "Congrats on reaching 300 pounds. And below that, in smaller letters, "Still growing strong." The room went silent for a beat that felt like forever. I looked up, expecting to see some sort of apology or shock on my wife's face. Instead, she was fighting a smile. Around the table, everyone wore the same look, barely contained amusement. That's when my sister raised her wine glass and loudly toasted, "To the family disappointment." She joked about how I had let myself go, how I used to be the athletic one, and how maybe if I spent less time eating and more time exercising, I'd finally amount to something. The room erupted in laughter. Not awkward chuckles, real, hearty laughter. My wife was laughing so hard she had tears in her eyes. My parents were chuckling, nodding like they agreed. Even my usually quiet brother-in-law was grinning ear to ear. The kids didn't even understand, but they laughed because the adults were laughing. I just stood there, smiling like I always did, because that was my role. I smiled as the candles flickered on my cruel birthday cake. I smiled for the photos. I smiled because I was the provider, the rock, the one who never complained. I even took pictures of my own humiliation. Group shots, cake shots, everyone laughing, because that's what I always did. After the cake, they made sure I got an extra large slice, joking about how I should keep up the good work. I excused myself to check on the grill, but really, I needed a moment alone. Standing by the sizzling steaks, I thought about the numbers that actually mattered, the $15,000 I'd given my sister for her divorce and apartment, the $8,000 I sent my parents every few months, the $2,000 monthly allowance my wife used for shopping and spa days, the college funds I was building for the kids while living paycheck to paycheck. I'd sacrificed my health, my hobbies, my social life, everything, to keep this family afloat. And this was how they thanked me, by laughing at me. When the party finally ended, my wife hummed while cleaning up, clearly pleased with how the night had gone. She even thanked me for being such a good sport, like I had volunteered to be humiliated for their entertainment. That night, after she went to bed, I sat in my home office staring at the computer. I opened our banking app and looked at the accounts. the joint savings where my paycheck went, the money market fund for emergencies, and the investment account for retirement. I thought about my sister calling me a disappointment, the parents who relied on me laughing in my face, the wife who hadn't worked in 3 years mocking my body while living off my labor. So I acted. First, I transferred $47,000 from savings to a new account only I could access. Then $23,000 from the money market. I liquidated the investments too, moving it all somewhere safe. I left just enough in the joint checking for 1 month of bare-bones expenses, rent, utilities, groceries.
No extras.
3 days later, my wife's card was declined at her nail appointment. She called me, panicked. I told her to call the bank. That same afternoon, I sat with a divorce lawyer during my lunch break. By the time I got home, she was pacing the living room, bank statements everywhere. Furious, she demanded answers. I calmly explained that I'd secured the money and that we needed to have a serious conversation about our marriage. The next day, my sister called for her rent money. I told her I wouldn't be helping her anymore. She went silent, then asked if this was about the birthday party. I told her it was about a lifetime of being used. She tried to laugh it off as a joke, but I reminded her that real jokes are funny for everyone involved, not just the ones laughing. When my dad called about their mortgage, I told him I couldn't send money anymore. He started lecturing me about family obligations. I asked him why laughing at me like a circus act counted as family loyalty. He had no answer. In the weeks that followed, my wife called everyone we knew, painting me as some kind of financial villain who had stolen money from his own children. She left out the part where every dollar came from my hard work, and she had drained nearly as much as I earned on her own luxuries. My sister tried tears, then anger, then manipulation. My parents tried guilt. None of it worked this time. 3 weeks after my birthday, I moved out into a small, clean apartment that was fully mine. No joint accounts.
No surprise bills.
No one laughing at me in my own home. My wife fought the divorce, demanding alimony and half of everything. She got half the debt and a new reality check instead. My sister lasted 10 days before moving back in with my parents. My parents had to downsize their lifestyle, finally living within their means. I started therapy. I lost 30 pounds in 6 months. Not because of shame, but because I finally stopped stress eating to survive the life I'd built for everyone else. For the first time in decades, I felt peace. Sometimes, I still look at the birthday photos on my phone. Not with sadness, but with clarity. I see a man who gave everything to people who didn't respect him. I see the exact moment he decided to stop being the family doormat. Being the family disappointment turned out to be the best promotion I ever got. Because disappointments get to walk away with their dignity, their money, and finally, their freedom. That night after the party, when the house was finally silent and my wife was asleep, I sat alone in my home office. My computer screen glowed in the dark, and I stared at the numbers in our bank accounts. The joint savings account that my paycheck fed into every 2 weeks. The emergency fund I had been building for years. The investment account meant to secure our future. And in that quiet, I thought about every cruel laugh from that night. My sister calling me a family disappointment while living off my money. My parents, who needed my help to survive, smiling and nodding as if my humiliation was well-deserved. My wife, the woman I had sacrificed for, fighting tears of laughter over a cake that mocked my weight and my life. Something inside me shifted. I realized in that moment that I had spent years breaking my back to support people who didn't respect me, who saw me only as a wallet with a pulse. I'd carried them all, financially and emotionally, while losing myself completely. And for what? To be laughed at in my own home, on the day meant to celebrate me. I made a decision. Slowly, deliberately, I began transferring the money. $47,000 from savings into a new account only I could access. $23,000 from the money market into that same account. I liquidated the investments and moved them as well. By morning, everything was secure under my name. I left just enough in the joint account to cover 1 month of bare necessities. Rent, utilities, groceries. No extra spending.
No spa trips.
No rent for my sister. No comfort for anyone who had laughed at my pain. 3 days later, my wife's card was declined at her weekly nail appointment. She called me, panicked. I calmly told her to check with the bank. While she was discovering our empty accounts, I was sitting in a divorce lawyer's office on my lunch break. That evening, when I came home, she was pacing the living room with bank statements spread across the coffee table. Her voice shook with rage as she demanded to know what I had done. I told her the truth. I had moved the money somewhere safe, and we needed to talk about our marriage. She screamed that I had stolen from my family. I reminded her that every single dollar came from me. She threatened to call the police, and I told her to call a lawyer instead. The next day, my sister called for her usual rent money. I told her she wouldn't be receiving any more help. There was a long silence, and then she asked if this was about the birthday party. I told her it was about years of being used. She tried to laugh it off, saying the toast was just a joke. I told her jokes are supposed to be funny for everyone, not just the people doing the laughing. My parents called soon after, worried because my monthly transfer hadn't come through. My father lectured me about family responsibility, and I asked him why he thought mocking me in front of my children counted as support. He had no answer. 3 weeks later, I moved out. I rented a small, clean apartment that was fully mine. No joint accounts, no shared expenses, no one leeching off my work. My wife fought the divorce, demanded alimony, and tried to claim half of everything. In the end, she got half the debt and a harsh reality check. My sister lasted 10 days before she had to move back in with my parents. My parents were forced to downsize and finally live within their means. For the first time in decades, I felt free. I started therapy, stopped stress eating, and began losing the weight they had mocked me for. Not out of shame, but out of peace. 6 months later, I had lost 30 pounds and gained something far more valuable: my self-respect. I finally understood the difference between being loved and being used. Sometimes I look at the photos from that night, the cake, my fake smile, my entire family laughing, and I remember the exact moment I stopped being the family doormat. They had wanted to celebrate me for reaching 300 pounds. Instead, they created the man who finally walked away. Being the family disappointment was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because disappointments don't get used, they get free.